This video, we will talk about how to use the include guard when we do the class implementation in the header file to protect our header file won't be include more than one time. And that's the first time we will see what is the exception handling. We are also using the constructor function in different way to see how we can define the default value for all the private data attribute. And also we will talk about more about our constant keyword. The constant keyword, before we use that in many different ways, but we will see how we'll define a constant object and also how to define a getter function. So to talk about all the topic, we will use the example from the time class. The time class source file you can get from our module 9. So please focus on the example 1 and example 2. That's both are a folder. So in here, when we define a time class, you will see I have the header file and the CPP file will including all the member function implementation. And here, the other CPP file will be the driver program. So let's see the example now. So we see what is our time class. From now on, whenever I show you the UML diagram, you will know what's inside this class. So for this time class, we have 3 private data attributes. We have hours, minutes, and the second. Then we have a default constructor. So when I say that's a default constructor, because you can see here, the constructor function name is the same as our class name, and we don't have any parameter. Then we have a set time setter function. You can provide the new hours and the minutes and the second. Then we can print the time in the universal, that means 24 hours, or print the standard like you have AM and PM. So here I want you to go over the first one is the header file. So you will see the header file like we talked about before. When you define a class, you have the class keyword and the class name. So our class name is time. So since our hours, minutes, and the second, they are all integer, but they are unsigned integer. So here, in order to prevent we have a negative number, we can define our int is unsigned integer. Remember in the class definition, if I didn't specify the modifier, here that means default is private. So we have 3 private data attributes. So in the public member function, we have the constructor, default constructor. Then we have setter function and 2 print function. So here we want to talk about one thing we see other than before is here. You can see in line 10 and 11 to line 25. This one is earlier we call the include guard. So include guard, usually you have that's a 3 line. They are all directive. So that's why just like you include the library, we have the pound sign here as well. But here we say pound sign if not define time underscore h. Then we define time header file. So here is end if. So this include guard is sometimes when we include the library, we maybe have our one header file include the library. Then the other source file, they also include the same library. But sometimes if you include the same library twice, on the other hand, when we include the library, actually how they include is just compiler copy over the content and paste to the source file. So that's why sometimes if you try to copy the same definition twice in your code, they will have compiling error. So that's why we have the include guard. So include guard is try to prevent sometimes because we have one CPP file include IO string, but this one may be just the source file, it's not the driver program. Then we include that source file, the CPP file again in the other driver program. Then the other driver program will also include the IO string library. So that means they will copy over the IO string library content twice. So in order to prevent that happen, for all the header file now you want to include, please have the beginning have if not defined. So this one just means if we already have the define for the time class, the time age being included, so we won't copy again. So they can prevent us to copy over the same content twice. So that's we call the include guard. So that's our header file time.h file. So the next one we see how we will implement all the public member function. So the first one, constructor. You will see here that's the time.cpp file. So of course here we need to make sure we will include the time.h file. So that's our class definition. So you will see here the constructor earlier we have, you need to add the class name and the double colons to make sure this member function associated with this class. And you will see that's an empty constructor function. So then you will see here the hours, minutes, seconds. Here we have assigned the value they all equal to 0, not inside the function, but is after the constructor colon. Then you have hour, minutes, second. So this one actually is the first time we show you. This one we call the initializer. We call that the constructor initializer list. The constructor initialize list is we allowed in the constructor before you really invoke the function content, you can assign the variable you want to have here. So here you will specify your member, data member variable name. So then in the parentheses, that's the value you assign. So then the command to separate each variable. This one actually is the first time we see the initializer list. So then this one is different from what we have before. If you remember before, whenever we try to define the constructor, we need to, the purpose for constructor is to initialize all the private data member. So usually you can just in the constructor body to assign the variable value one by one. So that's the traditional way we do that. But also here we show you that's the second way we can do that. That we call, you also can have those variable name assign the value in the initialized list. So that we call the second option. You can specify the default value for each data member. We can have that in the constructor initializer. Remember, the most important thing for the constructor is try to initialize all the data member. So here you have one way to do is you can have all those variable value in the initializer. So then the second way, or you can in the function body. Or later we will show you we have the other way in the second version. But here that's finish our first version. So our first version for the time class, we also have the set time. So that's further to talk about what is the purpose for setter function. Right, setter function is we can provide passing the new value so we can update each data member. So for example, we specify hours, minutes, and the seconds. So then we can update the new value into our host object, hour, minute, and second. But the other important thing for the setter function is, since you will assign the new value, so the setter function have the other important purpose is to do the validation. You specify the new value. I'm not just right away assign. Instead, actually we should check. So you can see here, since the hours should be between 0 to 24, minutes need to be between 0 to 60, second need to be 0 to 60. So that's why only you provide me the correct value, so then I assign. Otherwise, we can throw some error. So this one you will see the first time we talk about the exception handling. So here, if something wrong, we don't want to reset our value, so we throw the exception. So here, whenever you throw the exception, you need to use the through keyword. So then the exception you will throw. Whenever our program, if an exception is through, the program will crash. So later we will see, after you threw the exception, how we will handle that in the main function. So then the next two actually just print our time in the universal time. That's mean you see the format like here. So they will be between 0 to 24 hours. So then this one is we do the standard time format. So that's why you have AM or PM. So here we will have a conditional operator. Remember before we talk about conditional operator, you have the question mark. So this one is true. We do the first one. If this one, the condition is false, so then we return the second one. So that's why we can print our time in the standard format. So now I want you to download this example from chapter 9, example 1. So here you will see we will have our driver program. Our driver program will create a time. So here is our example 1, the driver program. After you include the time.h and download time.cpp file, this one is we show you. When you create an object, you can do like this way in line 14. So that's we create an object. So since you have your class name, class data type, your object name, so this one they will call the default constructor. So earlier our default constructor, remember, hour, minute, and the second, they are all the same, 0. And also, can we create an object reference? Right, so you can see this ampersand, we always know whenever you see the ampersand, this one means is reference. We can create the reference referral to the object T. So on the other hand, your T reference actually refer to the same object. We can create a reference, we can create a pointer to refer to the same object. So actually in line 14, 15, and 16, we only create one object T, but this object being referred by reference by a pointer. So when you use the T, when we invoke the member function, we use the dot. So then when you use the reference, how we will invoke those member function? Can we invoke those member function? You still can. So if you have your reference, so then when you do the reference, actually the same thing. When you do the reference, you're just using the dot. They will invoke those member function. However, if you use a pointer, remember you need to use the arrow. But the pointer also can dereference, right? So then you can use in the dot. So that's different way we can refer to the same object actually, but we're using different way to refer that. And using different way to invoke those member function. So this example, I want you to run that. But here, since the first time we talked about the exception handling. So earlier, remember when we set the time, right? If your new hours, minutes, and the second time is out of the boundary, the exception will be through from the set time. So here, whenever you have exception through, if I don't have line 32 or 36, I only have this one, they will through the exception, your program will crash. But now we can handle our exception. So when we handle our exception, we have the statement, possibly will through the exception in a try block. Then in this try block, afterward we have a catch. So you catch what? You catch the same exception through from the try block. So earlier our setter function threw an invalid argument. So then we catch that one, so we display the information. So here, even we threw the exception because we try to catch that and handle that. So that's why you will see the output here. They display the exception error information. So please run the program.